Hello, everyone. This video is a part of series Understanding Auteur Films, based on 3-volume books of the same title. In this video we'll talk about The Passenger by Michelangelo Antonioni. Except for a brief introduction of the film, the video has the following sections. Journalist who failed to become a hero. The power of images and the powerlessness of words. His life story and its cynical observer. Now, let's begin. The Passenger, 75. Michelangelo Antonioni is a filmmaker famous for his so-called Alienation trilogy he created in the early 1960s. However, his themes and style are so diverse that it is impossible to describe them by focusing on the trilogy, and they also change with the times. As it was already clear in Red Desert, 64, but especially after the expansion of his activities outside of Italy beginning from Blow Up, 66, Antonioni became even more sensitive to the zeitgeist, releasing works that reflect that. Yet, it can be said that he has been dealing with the same theme ever since the late 1950s, when he began making his own author's films. The Passenger stars a popular American actor Jack Nicholson in the lead role, and is a political thriller-like story that unfolds in multiple countries, an African country, England, Germany, and Spain. This film has a different scope from the aforementioned trilogy, Red Desert, and Blow Up, and while seeming even entertaining, it also contains quite a few innovations in cinematic expression. It can be said that this is an indispensable film when talking about the auteur films of the 1970s. In this video, I will explore this work primarily from the perspective of the complex interrelationship between the story and the images that serve its narrative function. Journalist who failed to become a hero. The plot of The Passenger can be summarized as follows. David Locke, a middle-aged international journalist, after the sudden death of David Robertson, a man of a similar age whom he met by chance in a certain African country where he was reporting, begins acting in his place. However, when Locke's wife in his homeland becomes suspicious, his adventure as a different person turns into a life on the run, and in the end he is killed by a government employee of a certain country who views Robertson as an enemy. By adding details about the main character David's background and interview subjects to this plot, as well as an episode of a casual love story. As a result, the story the audience receives will likely have elements of genre films such as political thrillers, suspense, road movies, and romance. However, Antonioni did not intend to turn this story into a multi-genre entertainment piece. The film itself is genreless as a whole, and the story contains a universal lesson. Multi-genre is only a result, and the details mentioned above lend credibility to the story being told, presenting it not as an abstract fable but as something that could happen to an individual living in modern society. As in many great narrative works, the reality of the details and the didacticism of the whole coexist here. Nicholson plays David Locke, a British journalist who was educated in the United States. He is in the desert to shoot a documentary film about Africa for a British television. This becomes clear about 25 to 30 minutes after the plot begins to develop to some extent. But the first 10 minutes only show that he is fed up with his job. After David's wife Rachel, living in London, knows her husband's death, she and Martin, a TV producer, rewatch some of David's material. There, the leader of a military dictatorship reminiscent of the Chadian Civil War was interviewed. The black man, called the president, says the guerrillas have been nearly wiped out and the country's future is bright. The Chadian Civil War is a political event that was still ongoing at the time the film's production. It could also be said that Antonioni drawed the relationship between modern society and individualsa from global perspective, following his feature film Zabriskie Point, 1970, with themes from the student movement and hippie culture in the United States, and the documentary film China, 1972. Considering this context, it is no coincidence that the protagonists of The Passenger are trying to make a documentary that touches on the Civil War in Africa. Perhaps it reflects Antonioni's own interests. However, this film does not have a direct political message through the protagonist. Because, as Rachel confesses to Martin, when she went to see the interview, David simply accepted the dictator's hypocritical words and obediently recorded them. It is almost certain that he initially pursued his coverage for humanitarian reasons. He even tried to use recorded footage of dissidents being executed under military dictatorship. However, the audience doesn't realize this until about halfway through the film. That David was a somewhat well-known journalist can be easily inferred from his conversations with Robertson, as well as from Martin's efforts to create a special program upon the news of his death. But the audience that follows his words and actions in the present will pay little attention to the past accomplishments that brought him fame. Two members of the rebel organization that David came into contact with in Munich are captured by government spies without his knowledge, and David himself leaves for Barcelona according to the schedule written in Robertson's notebook. He disguises himself in Munich with a fake mustache, and in Barcelona he sticks his torso out of a cable car window and spreads his arms to imitate a bird. David, acting as Robertson, looks more frivolous than Robertson himself, who seems to have been trusted by rebel groups seeking to procure weapons for people's liberation. Thus the latter only hints at his worldview in the recorded conversation. From the moment David appears in the film, he is portrayed as a middle-aged man being not very enthusiastic about his activities in a foreign land. It is difficult to discern the characteristics of a humanitarian journalist in him, who complains to a disabled truck in the desert and tries to become a different person after the death of Robertson, whom he had befriended at a hotel. Audiences watching this film for the first time may even wonder who this man is as they observe David. If we look back at the entire story of the film, we can see that David was almost doomed from the moment he was introduced. So why did he fail to become a hero as a humanitarian journalist and ended up being killed as a nameless man? The appeal of this work as a drama lies not in the plot, which includes elements of political thriller or suspense, but rather in the questions that emerge from the story. However, Antonioni does not explain this through the characters' lines, as is usually done in feature films classified as dramas. It simply suggests to the audience to carefully observe the words and actions of the protagonist and the key characters around him, and to infer his motives from the slightest clues. From the beginning, this strategy, which can be said to be the filmmaker's challenge to the audience, seems to be justified by the political thriller and suspense-like story following the genre's rules of a mystery. The power of images and the powerlessness of words. David, the main character in The Passenger, appears as a nameless man and dies as a different person. By the time Jack Nicholson starred in this film, he had already received acclaim for his performances in films such as Easy Rider and Chinatown, and in the same year he starred in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor the following year. But in this film he appears to be just a characterless white man, rather than a great actor with character. If David stands out in this or that episode, it is not because he is unique as an individual, but because he is alienated as a figure with otherness in his environment. And this alienated situation is clearly shown through the images. Images serve to make the situation of alienation visible, while at the same time telling the story of this alienated protagonist. We will see this in detail. The film's running time of 2 hours and 6 minutes is framed by 2 episodes that demonstrate the powerful descriptive power of images and the powerlessness of words. The first episode, which begins with the credits, marks the introduction of the main character and his departure on a dangerous journey, while the final episode, centered around a long take, depicts his death. They are approximately the same length, 8 to 9 minutes. For a total of 16 to 17 minutes, the film continues to tell the story almost entirely without relying on words, without dialogue from characters, narration, or subtitles. In the opening episode, a man, David, arrives in a town that appears to be an Islamic area inhabited by black people, takes a young boy as a guide into a truck, and goes to a desert area with steep rocky mountains. It depicts the story up to the time when he started climbing the Rocky Mountain with his guide. In a typical commercial feature film, there is a conversation scene shortly after the protagonist or major characters appear, which hints at their names, character settings, and some aspects of their personalities. But Antonioni, on the other hand, doesn't reveal David's name, his occupation, or even what he's doing in the apparently foreign desert until more than 10 minutes. Until the tires of his truck get stuck in the sand and he ends up walking to his hotel, the conversations he has with the locals are very short, and some of them seem like he's talking to himself. In some cases, the other person may not respond. David's first line is, "Do you speak English?" French, in both English and French, but the boy guide doesn't answer. As soon as the film begins, the camera reveals its character of the observer with its impersonal will. David appears in the opening long shot, but before the audience can make out his features, he disappears from the screen as the camera pans to the left and is replaced by local children running around a street corner. But before the audience can pay attention to them, another shot follows. Such impersonal and floating camera movements can be seen throughout the film, as if the environment in which David and other main characters behave is presented as being equal to them. In particular, with regard to the main character David, from the moment of his appearance in a remote town full of black people, he is an outsider and at the same time does not attract much attention from anyone. This is also indicated by the characteristics of the composition, color setting, and camera movement of each shot. Surrounded by houses made of mud and stone, narrow streets covered in sand, and black people wearing white turbans and plain clothes, the Western attire of David's short-sleeved red checkered shirt and workwear pants, sunglasses is noticeably foreign and gives an out-of-place impression. However, the townspeople do not show any curiosity, only gesturing towards him to ask for cigarettes and point out his destination in an unfriendly manner. Furthermore, the camera's sudden pans, which serve the narrative function through observation, as I pointed out, give the impression that even the film's author doesn't pay much attention to David. The protagonist's alienation reaches its climax in the final episode. It is at the moment of his death when the camera, playing a main part of the narrative function of the film, appears to be the furthest away from him. The largest part of this episode consists of one shot lasting approximately 6.5 minutes. After persuading the female student he had been traveling with to go home, David, left alone in his hotel room, killed by people on the government side as a collaborator of the Rebel People's Liberation Front, whom he had unintentionally a contact with in Munich. But the camera does not show the scene of the killing. Initially located in his room, the camera slowly approaches the window, goes through the window to show events outside one after another, and then looks through the window from outside the hotel to show David lying on his back in bed. It shows the interaction between the corpse, the police officers who came to perform the autopsy, and Rachel and the female student. Throughout this long shot, the audience never sees David's face. At first, he is seen lying on his back on the bed, and only the body can be seen on the left edge of the screen. The window occupies the center of the screen. As the camera slowly approaches the window, only his lower body is visible, then only the tips of his feet, and then he disappears completely. At the end of the shot, his entire body is shown, but his face is not visible at all. This is a part of the video released at patreon.com. To watch a full version of this video, please visit patreon.com and join the membership of the author's page. You can watch exclusive 3 new video about world cinema every month, plus some more videos, i.e. recordings of authors' public lectures etc., only for $2 a month. Your support is very important for our work.